Yo, what is up guys, Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So Gabriel Valenzuela defeats Robbie Davies Jr. by a 10-round majority decision. Relieved to say the right man got the decision. I felt the scorecards were too close, but ultimately the right man got his hand raised, and that's really all that matters. Yeah, it was a good fight actually, competitive 10-rounder. Both guys had their moments, but to me, Gabriel Valenzuela was always the guy in control in this fight. He actually started this fight exceptionally well in the first 3 rounds. Robbie Davies Jr. early on in this fight looked very disjointed, unorganised. He was switching between southpaw and orthodox, which wasn't really effective. And Valenzuela was being extremely crafty, and he was timing Robbie Davies Jr. with his straight right hand. And he was catching him with that shot throughout the first 3 rounds. In the second round, he caught Robbie Davies Jr., which made him backpedal into the ropes. And to me, the ropes kept him up, so I felt that could have been a knockdown, in all honesty. But the third round, Valenzuela actually dropped Robbie Davies Jr. with a short right hand, good shot in the exchanges, and it put Robbie Davies Jr. down. So the first 3 rounds were basically a disaster for Robbie Davies Jr. He was getting outboxed, he was getting countered, and he really wasn't effective at all. After the third round, I felt Robbie Davies Jr. started to come into it a bit more. Valenzuela actually got a point deducted in the 4th round for hitting on the break. He had a couple of warnings prior to his point deduction, so the point deduction was fair, but I'll come on to that a bit later. But yeah, in the middle rounds, I felt Robbie Davies Jr. started to have a bit more success with his jab, and also in moments where Robbie Davies Jr. had Valenzuela on the ropes, he was actually outworking Valenzuela in certain parts of his fight in those rounds. And I have to be honest, I actually believe Robbie Davies Jr. should have been applying more pressure in this fight. He was the bigger guy, the bigger, longer guy in there. And when he was on Valenzuela's chest, he was actually having a bit of success. So I think that's what Robbie Davies Jr. should have been doing throughout this fight. So yeah, Robbie Davies Jr. had a few good middle rounds, but you know, towards the end of the fight, Valenzuela started to take control again. Once again, that right hand coming into play, catching Robbie Davies Jr. flush. Rounds 8 and 9 were Valenzuela rounds, and round 10 was a big Valenzuela round because he actually hurt Robbie Davies Jr. in that round with once again a right hand. You know, that right hand was really the telling factor in this fight. He couldn't miss that shot when he was committing to it. And, you know, I've got to be honest, I felt Dominic Ingle gave Robbie Davies Jr. poor advice in the corner. In this fight, Robbie Davies was switching southpaw to orthodox constantly, and he was saying to Robbie Davies Jr. in the corner that he should stay southpaw to avoid that straight right hand. Well, the southpaw theoretically is always vulnerable to a straight right hand, and when Robbie Davies Jr. was in that southpaw stance, he was getting caught by that straight right hand time and time again. So I'm not sure why Dominic Ingle was encouraging Robbie Davies Jr. to be in that southpaw stance. If I was training if I was training Robbie Davies in that fight and I was in the corner, I'd be saying to him, put your hands up, nice tight guard, and walk this guy down. Get him on the ropes and work him. Because when Robbie Davies Jr. was doing that, he was actually having a bit of success. Dominic Ingle's corner instructions were bizarre to me, I've got to be honest. And, you know, in regards to the point deduction earlier on for Valenzuela, I bring it up because while it was a fair point deduction, Robbie Davies Jr. had so many warnings in this fight for hitting behind the heads. He got way more warnings than Valenzuela, and no points were deducted. So I felt that was a little unfair, quite frankly. But yeah, Valenzuela, the rightful winner, he was in control throughout most of this fight. First 3 rounds he bossed, last 3 rounds he bossed, he scored the knockdown, and all in all he was the guy in control in this fight. And yeah, he looked pretty good, crafty, awkward, nice timing, decent power, done the basics well, and yeah, he basically just outboxed Robbie Davies Jr. throughout the most of this fight. But yeah, share your thoughts below. It's been your guy Delboy. What did you make of this fight? Peace.